participate. Ms. Montgomery, I'm a little bit fascinated by your testimony on space law. How long have you been kind of in space law?
Going on 30 years. I was in private practice and did some satellite work, and then about 25 years ago, I joined the FAA, where I spent 22 years doing space law.
Okay, and I noticed
Rockets.
you talked about in '67 there were signatories to the treaty, and of course that would have been under Nixon, and you said it was ratified by the Senate, I believe.
Yes, yes, it was.
Okay, and you weren't even in elementary school at that point, so I'm fascinated by your learned so
Sir,
quick.
I was in elementary school,
Work with me here. I'm trying to help you. So,
but I have to be truthful.
no, well, I appreciate that, as any good counselor would. And I'm reading about the case where you're talking about what kind of law would govern this. And the reason I'm saying that is because we're going to talk about some SpaceX stuff and their failure. And you cite the case Medellin versus Texas from 2008, which I'm thoroughly familiar with because it was a Mexican national that raped and killed 2 girls and was sentenced to death. And I was going in as a state legislator nominee during there and was following that very closely. And you talk about the ruling where they said that those kinds of treaties, because the Mexican government sued, of course, wanted to make that his rights were violated. He didn't get notified that he had the right to contact his embassy. And you know the case. So anyway, I'm kind of fascinated that you say that might apply to space treaties. Now, go ahead.
Yes, I would say it does, because in the law, you can have principles that will apply across industries or situations if even though they're all very different. So although the treaty was ratified, that is different from whether it is self-executing or not. And so when the Supreme Court talked about the treaty at issue in the Medellin case,
Right.
it articulated the principle that if a treaty has been signed onto and ratified, but the entity in the U.S. government that it obligates is the U.S. Congress, then everyone has to wait for the U.S. Congress
To act.
yeah,
that's
by
right.
passing a law.
Right, and I agreed with that opinion, by the way, just for the record. But I want to fast forward. How many other attorneys are there that, and you may not know this, where do they teach space law? Where's that taught? I notice you're from what college?
I teach at Catholic University's Columbus School
Okay.
of Law. There is also, Representative Brooks is in here, Ole Miss has
Okay.
a space law course. Nebraska has a space law curriculum. And then Georgetown and GW also have space law classes, American University space law classes.
Right.
And McGill in Canada.
My fear is that we don't want those international, indeed extraterrestrial, if you will, treaties being applied down in the various and sundry states and being hampering what commercial space exploration could do. And I'm thinking about, is there a move to take that law and to hold countries and states accountable? Have you seen that any at all?
Yes, sir. When Moon Express went to the FAA for a payload review, the FAA did grant it, but it said in its press release that we are concerned that they're not going to be regulated, and it's good they're only there for 2 weeks. Otherwise, under Article 6, we would perhaps have had to say no. And I would say that that is contrary to the Supreme Court's articulation of how
And you noted in one of your footnotes that one of the administrations took a different view of Article 6, one of the preclusions. Was that the Obama administration?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I gathered by the date. Let me move forward here. I'm deeply concerned about the secrecy surrounding the launch pad explosion that destroyed SpaceX's Dragon capsule. Are you all familiar with that? I'm not getting all heads shakes. Okay. As you know, that was an unmanned test at Cape Canaveral, and it was recently revealed that a critical parachute failure occurred during the Dragon test capsule in April. Y'all are all aware of that? No, I'm not getting all head shakes. Okay. This was kept secret from the public. So this mishap is especially distressing given that NASA's Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel specifically directed that parachute designs be finalized and proven before test flights occur. Back to the counselor. Ms. Montgomery, this should be governed by state law, federal law. Does it fall under the purview of the Space Treaty? What say you?
It is governed by the FAA regulation, the Commercial Space Launch Act and the FAA regulations in terms of prepare. I'm not really that familiar with the incident, but was it for a commercial crew or was it?
It was unmanned, but yes, it was for a commercial crew.
Okay, so as you may be aware, Congress told the FAA that it could not regulate for the safety of persons on board until 2023, that the industry is supposed to have the same sort of barnstorming era that the aviation industry got in the early days, so that the FAA may be hampered in its ability to look at that. I don't know, but I stress that I don't know because I don't.
Well, I know Mr. Stallmer made a comment in his his remarks, that the FAA had only gone halfway toward regulations, I believe you said, hadn't gone far enough. And I just want us to be careful, know who's going to be controlling, who's going to be regulating, what law governs. You have a comment, Madam Chair, if you'll indulge me? Mr. Stallmer?
Yes.
What I was referring to was the halfway is in this current NPRM on some of the regulatory and the streamlining.
Oh, okay, I got you. Thank you, and I appreciate your indulgence. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Weber, and thank you for raising, I think, some very important questions, and thank you to our panel. If it